Okay, we're continuing with this this old-fashioned photograph. As you can see, I've done her face. We kind of went over some of the technique of putting in features and faces when I did the Dreams of Camelot. So I didn't think I was going to do a whole video on putting in her face, but there she is, and I've started her hair, and right now she looks like a blonde. She's not. She's got quite a bit of dark hair, but the underpinning washes that I put in are obviously a little bit on the golden side, and there's a lot of sheen on one side of her hair where the light is hitting it, and then it's very dark on this side. You'll also notice that I changed the background. I didn't like that very dark background. For some reason, every time I looked at it, it just made me upset. So I did the whole thing over again. I didn't try to scrub it out. I just redid the picture and started from scratch and kept it more on the kind of a mauvey peach color. And it worked well with her skin and her brown eyes, and here we go. And basically, this is just, I'm just going to show you how I do this. I started it with putting in wet washes of a gold color, a little of the peach color, and then when that dried, I started in with a number 2 very pointed brush, and started doing individual hairs and finding patterns in her hair. And it's given me a nice pattern to work from. So basically all I have to do is work from this. And I will be putting in the color. It's a mixture of Quinacridone Rust, Ultramarine Blue, and I put in a little touch of that Quinacridone Rose because that's the color I've been using, and it kind of ties it in with all the rest here. Now, the hair on this side of her head is sort of in the light, and there's only just a few places that you see that are very, very dark. So I'm just going to add that little bit there and some very light in there. And then the same with this. This is very dark in here, but other than that, it really isn't all quite that dark. And basically what we're doing is painting negatively around the light hairs. See, there's a couple light hairs there. Well, I'm going to paint in between them. And then she's got some little fine little baby hairs that are just peeking out in the shadow here. I'm just going to put a couple of those in. And I'm just using the very tip of my brush with not a whole lot of paint in it. Already got some of this established here. And you'll notice that the hairs don't all go just in one very neat direction. Hairs follow hairs, and if one's out of place, several are out of place. So you end up with hairs going across other hairs. Now she has quite a few really light ones that are showing up just in the light here. So I'm painting negatively around the ones that I see, Now there's quite a lot of light spot right there, and this kind of blends into it. So we'll just put a little bit more water on the brush and just blend that into the lighter hair. And then it's a little darker in some areas underneath here. She's got light hairs coming across the top. It's kind of like she has really dark hair, but hair is made up of several different colored strands, and they're all come together to look dark, or they all come together to look blonde. But no two hairs are exactly the same color. So we want to emphasize that in this. And let's face it, there's not much to this picture except her face and her hair. So it behooves me to try and be careful about it and to be accurate. There are some dark hairs in here, but they're very fine, and you don't see them too much. One of the things I mentioned on another video was that this is like a puzzle, and it's why I really prefer the cold pressed paper, because the paper itself has a pattern in it of texture, and once you get it wet and I put my first washes on, some of that texture shows up, and you can use it as a guideline for finding these little hairs and how they live here. Now those are very, very pale hairs on this side, and so what I'm going to do is take some of, they're pale hairs, but they're not that pale. She still has relatively dark hair, and so what I want to do is to darken up a couple of the places that I see are very dark underneath. So I want the patterns of the hairs, but I don't want them to stand out as thick strands like that. So we'll soften everything. And then when that dries a little bit, I'll probably put a wash of clear water over the top to give them, to blend them in a little better. Also, I'm going to put a little bit more dark in here. This is quite dark underneath where she's got these light hairs. Don't want that. There. And her hair seems to be darker as it goes to the crown of her head. And no, it's not because she dyed her hair and her roots are showing. I don't think she did it at all. This picture was taken in 2005. I think it's just that The picture is a black and white picture, and I think her hair must be kind of auburn, because it has a lot of lighter hairs and highlights. So my guess is that it's been bleached out in the sun a little bit on the very ends and still quite dark at the root. Okay, now we start getting in here. Into really dark hairs, and there's a shine that goes across this top part here. So I'm going to give myself a very tiny line of, so I don't get lost doing all this tiny painting. It's easy to get yourself lost and forget where your highlights are. So now I know where they are. And I can continue to put these darker hairs. And here we really don't have any light hairs at all. She's got dark hairs and darker hairs. Now that's dried off a little bit on the top here. So I want to darken that just a tiny bit as it's coming around into that blonde, this one blonde streak here. Okay, now there are some dark hairs that go through that shiny streak. I'll just leave it right there, and then I want to take some water and soften that edge there. All right, now we'll do the top that comes over this way. and always to go in the direction that the hair is lying. Okay. Now this has more light shining on again, so there's going to be some lighter streaks and hairs going in odd places. That's where her natural part is. Okay, now this side of her hair is basically all very dark. And so there's one tiny little spot right there that's lighter, and I'll just keep it a little lighter. And the rest in the film is almost black. Of course, we're nowhere near black yet. And she has a little bit over her ear there, and little stray hairs coming out there. Okay. there's a real tendency to just keep a rhythm going in the same direction. And you can't really do that. You need to follow some of the lines that you see that send that hair in a different direction, just to keep it. Nobody's hair gets totally smoothly in one direction. It just isn't natural. So find those little crevices and those funny little places that tell you there's a crosshair, there's a hair going in another direction, one that's out of place. And all it takes is a little patience and some observations. And then your hair begins to look a little bit more natural, instead of everything going in one direction. It goes basically in one direction, just not totally. And here, this is really, really much darker in here. Okay. Okay. Okay, and I think I want to do that here a little darker. Now, her hair doesn't have a whole lot of definition on this side because it's so very dark. But you're perfectly free to add some. Okay, it gives her hair some character.